My name is Alexandra Price. I'm 30 years old, and I work in IT at a mid-sized tech company in New York. Even though a year has passed, I still remember that night, like my skin remembers fire, because that was the night I finally understood something I'd spent my whole life avoiding. Sometimes family love isn't enough to make you stay. Sometimes family love is the thing that tells you to leave. 1 year ago, my parents invited me over for dinner. They said, "We need to talk about something important," but they wouldn't say what it was. And honestly, a small, foolish part of me felt hopeful. I told myself maybe they wanted to reconnect. Maybe they missed me. Maybe they were finally ready to speak to me like I wasn't just the extra set of hands in the family. On the way there, I stopped at a store and picked up a bottle of light red wine. It wasn't fancy, just something warm enough to make the evening feel soft around the edges. The drive was about 30 minutes. Familiar streets, familiar turns, and the closer I got, the more my chest tightened, the way it always did when I returned to the house where I learned how to swallow disappointment politely. When I arrived, the smell of dinner hit me before I even stepped fully inside. My mom had cooked all my favorites: grilled meat, warm soup, a small dessert she only made for special occasions. The table looked like love. The kitchen sounded like love too, her moving around, the clink of plates, the gentle hum of something normal. For a moment, I truly believed I was walking into a real family night. I smiled, set the wine on the table, and thought, maybe tonight will be different. I didn't know I was stepping into a carefully staged scene. And I definitely didn't know that by the end of it, I'd walk out of that house without saying goodbye, because there wouldn't be anything left in me to give them. Dinner started warm. There were jokes, little stories. My mom kept putting food on my plate like I was still 17. My dad asked about my job in that half-interested way, like he wanted credit for raising someone stable, but didn't want the trouble of actually understanding me. Hudson sat across from me, quiet, scrolling on his phone. Hudson is my younger brother. He's 11 years younger than me, which means my entire life has been divided into two versions: before Hudson existed, and after Hudson became the center of everything. But that night, even I wasn't prepared for how openly they'd prove it. After dinner, my dad leaned back in his chair and said, almost casually, "Let's move to the living room." My mom poured juice into glasses and set one in front of each of us. At that point, I still wasn't suspicious. Everything felt too calm to be dangerous. My dad sat down, looked around like he was making sure all the pieces were in place, then said, "Hudson got accepted into college." I turned to Hudson immediately, smiling. "Congratulations," I said genuinely. "That's huge." Hudson gave a small nod. No grin, no excitement, no disbelief. Just that calm expression of someone who has never doubted the world would give him what he wanted. Then my dad continued, slower now. "We don't want to pressure you," he said, voice measured. "We're just hoping you might be able to help Hudson a little as he starts this next chapter." I nodded without hesitation. "Of course," I said. "I'll get him a new laptop, something strong for school. Consider it a gift." I meant it too. As the older sister, I could afford that. It felt like a reasonable gesture. But the second the word laptop left my mouth, my dad's expression changed. His brows tightened, like I'd offered him a coin instead of what he believed he deserved. He set his glass down and looked at me more seriously. "That alone isn't enough," he said. My stomach dropped, just slightly, like my body recognized the shift before my brain accepted it. "Something more?" I asked carefully. "What exactly are you asking for?" My dad didn't hesitate anymore. He didn't soften it. He didn't pretend. "We're hoping you can help pay Hudson's tuition," he said. "Around $10,000 a year. We'll take care of his living expenses." The room went silent. Not the comfortable kind. The kind where the air feels like it's waiting to see if you'll bleed. I stared at him. I needed to be sure I hadn't misunderstood. "You're saying 10,000 a year?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. My dad nodded like this was obvious. "You're the eldest," he said. "You have a stable life, a good income. It's only right you share some of that with the family." My mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out at first. Then I let out a small laugh, not because it was funny, because it was unreal. My mom leaned forward, her voice softer than my dad's, but somehow sharper. "We're getting older," she said. "We can't manage everything anymore. You're his sister. You have a good job. We have no other choice." I looked at her. At the way she said no other choice, like my existence was the emergency exit they planned to use all along. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't a warm family conversation. This was a chessboard, and I was the piece they expected to sacrifice without complaint. I didn't keep them waiting long. After nearly a minute, I spoke, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Hudson is 18 now," I said. "He should start learning to stand independently, just like I did." I hadn't even finished the sentence when my dad lifted his hand sharply. "Enough," he snapped. "Are you going to help or not?" The warmth in the room collapsed, and my dad's voice, cold and sharp, cut straight through me. "Don't bring up your past like you're above everyone else," he said. "You're the oldest. It's right for you to struggle a little more." I stared at him. My hands were clenched in my lap without me realizing it. "That struggle," he continued, leaning forward, eyes red with anger, "is what got you where you are. You should be grateful to your parents for that." Grateful? For what? For working until 11 at night when I was in college? For studying until 2 in the morning? For eating canned food for days so the lights stayed on? For watching my student loans grow while my family sighed in relief that I didn't need help? I felt something crack inside me. Not loudly, just cleanly, like a thin glass thread finally snapping. I've never liked arguing. I didn't want to turn the night into a screaming match. But I also wasn't going to lie down and let them place Hudson's life on my spine. So I said it, clear and steady. "I can't." The second those words left my mouth, my dad slammed his hand on the table. The sound was violent, echoing in my ribs. He stood halfway up, face twisted, voice loud enough to carry outside. "If you don't give your brother $10,000, he shouted, "don't return to this house." Everything went blurry for a second. My mom rushed to him, panicked, muttering about his heart and trying to calm him down. Then she turned to me, eyes red, voice shaking, using the sentence she always used when she wanted guilt to do what love couldn't. "You're so cold-hearted," she said. "Don't you care about your parents?" I didn't answer, because the truth was I did care. That was the problem. Caring was the chain they kept around my ankle. And while all of this was happening, one person hadn't spoken once. Hudson. He was still on the sofa, eyes glued to his phone, fingers tapping through some game like the scene unfolding in front of him was background noise. Like my life being demanded, threatened, and ripped open was just inconvenient. That was when I understood. I didn't belong in that house anymore. I stood up, reached for my coat, and walked out without saying goodbye. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away. I didn't look back, because sometimes silence is the loudest scream. And that night, I screamed myself hoarse in my heart. Hudson is 11 years younger than me. Since the day he was born, I was expected to give in. Toys, food, attention, my parents' time. When I was little, I told myself it made sense. He was younger. But as I grew older, I realized something darker. There were things I didn't give up willingly. I just never had them to begin with. Not because of chance, because I wasn't their chosen child. I remember being 18, the same age Hudson is now. I'd received my college acceptance letter. My family made a small dinner to celebrate. But after dinner, my dad looked at me and said, almost casually, "Do you think you can work while studying? The family's finances are tight. If we cover your tuition too, we won't manage." My mom stared at the table like her silence was mercy. And because I loved them, because I didn't know how not to, I nodded. I agreed. They called it maturity, responsibility, understanding. Years later, my dad tells me I should thank him for that experience. He thinks I should be grateful. But Hudson? Hudson can't be expected to do the same. Instead of teaching him independence, they treat him like glass. And they expect me to be the one who pays for the padding. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my hands were shaking. The house I live in now is one I bought 2 years ago in a quiet suburb just outside New York. I bought it after I completed a major contract at work and got a raise, going from $100,000 to $130,000 a year. Even then, I still had to borrow $100,000 from the bank. I still owe about $20,000. That debt is one of the reasons I've been careful about everything. About money, about stability, about the future. The garage door lifted, and right as my car stopped, the front door opened. Ethan stepped outside, wearing a light jacket he'd clearly thrown on in a hurry. His face changed the moment he saw mine. "Alex," he said softly, already walking toward me. "Why are you home so early? Are you okay?" Ethan is my boyfriend. He's 2 years younger than me. We've been together for 3 years, and after 2, he moved in with me when we both felt the relationship had matured into something steady. He's the kind of man who doesn't force words out of you. He just stands close enough that you don't feel alone while you find them. Tonight, that mattered more than I could explain. I forced a small smile. "Just a little something at my parents'," I said. "Nothing big." He didn't push. He just slipped his arm around mine and guided me inside like he was silently telling my nervous system, "You're safe here." We sat on the sofa. For a long time, I didn't speak. Then the dam finally cracked. I told him everything. The dinner, the request, the number, the threat. The way Hudson didn't even look up from his phone. Ethan listened without interrupting once, and when I finished, he exhaled slowly, jaw tight. "How can they be so unfair?" he said. I didn't respond. Because even when your parents hurt you, there's a strange instinct to protect them, like defending them will somehow erase what they did. Ethan sensed my silence and didn't press further. He just sat beside me, quiet, present. His phone buzzed once on the coffee table. The screen lit up. For a split second, I saw the name, Sophie. Ethan flipped the phone over quickly, too quickly, then looked back at me with that calm expression he always wore. "You should try to sleep," he said gently. "We'll deal with this tomorrow." I nodded, even though I already knew. Tomorrow was coming whether I was ready or not, and I had a feeling my family wasn't done trying to claim what I'd built. The next morning at exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Not once, not politely, over and over, like whoever was outside believed persistence was a weapon. Ethan was in the kitchen, starting coffee. He glanced at me, question in his eyes. I stood up, already knowing the answer before I saw them. When Ethan opened the door, his shoulders stiffened. "Alex," he said quietly, "your parents and Hudson are here." I stepped into the hallway, and there they were. My father, my mother, Hudson, standing on my porch like last night never happened. Like their words hadn't cracked something permanent. I let them in. Not because they deserved it, because some part of me still wanted to believe they came for the right reason. I made coffee instinctively. 5 cups. The smell filled the room, but it couldn't hide the tension that slid into every corner of the house like fog. We sat. Ethan stayed beside me. Silent support, a steady anchor. My father spoke first. He looked tired. "I'm sorry for losing my temper," he said. "I shouldn't have told you to leave." My mother nodded, adding a few soft words that didn't land anywhere inside me. When they finished, I glanced at the clock. "I have to leave for work at 8, I said. "So, if you need to say something, get to the point." The 3 of them exchanged glances. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't an apology. It was a reset. A different tone. Different mask. Same demand. My father cleared his throat. "We're still hoping you'll help Hudson," he said, voice careful, like he was negotiating with a stranger instead of his own daughter. Hudson finally spoke, eyes lowered, voice filled with something that almost sounded like guilt. "Alexandra," he said, "I know yesterday got bad, but if you help with the first year, I promise I'll study hard." I kept my voice steady. "You can take student loans," I said, "and you can get a part-time job." Hudson's face tightened. "But if I do that," he said, "I'll graduate with debt." A quiet laugh escaped me. Not cruel, just stunned. "So you're afraid of debt," I said softly. "And what about me? Has anyone ever asked how that feels for me?" The room went silent. My mother's eyes shimmered. Then she reached for her favorite weapon again, guilt dressed as love. "Don't you care about your parents?" she whispered. I looked her straight in the eye. "Don't I care?" I said. "Who's been giving you money every year? For the roof, for the car, for hospital bills? That's over $3,000 a year." My father's face hardened instantly. "You're counting money against your parents?" he snapped. "I'm not counting," I said calmly. "I'm stating facts. If I didn't care, I wouldn't have given you anything." The air thickened. Ethan didn't speak, but I felt him shift slightly closer to me, like he was bracing for impact. And then, because I was done being cornered, I gave them my condition. I spoke clearly, making sure every word landed. "I will lend Hudson $40,000 for 4 years, I said. "No interest. But both of you will co-sign. And if he doesn't repay within 2 years of graduating, you take responsibility." My father's eyes sharpened. "So now you think you're successful," he said, voice rising. "And that gives you the right to make deals with your parents?" My mother stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "Useless child," she shouted, voice cracking. "From now on, I don't have a daughter like you." Then she turned, sharp as a blade, toward Ethan. "And you," she hissed, "don't think you've landed something special. One day she'll turn on you too, just like she did to us." Ethan finally lifted his gaze. His voice was calm but solid. "She hasn't turned on anyone," he said. "She just wants respect, and no one deserves to be treated the way you're treating her." My mother's eyes narrowed. "You're not family," she snapped. "Stay out of this." I felt Ethan's hand curl into a fist at his side. Hudson leaned back like he was bored. Then he shrugged and said with a mocking edge, "You're so selfish. It's just a small thing, and you're making it huge. If you ever need help in the future, don't count on me." Something cold settled inside me. I looked at him steady. "You've never helped me before," I said quietly. "So what exactly are you refusing?" No one answered. My father stared at the floor. My mother's breathing was sharp and furious. Hudson went back to his phone. And in that silence, I realized they weren't here to understand. They were here to win. I stood up. "If none of you agree to my condition," I said evenly, "then we're done. No money, no more discussions." I paused, looked at each of them, really looked. Then I finished, voice firm. "Now please leave my house. I have work." They stood one by one. No apology this time. No softness. Just the quiet shuffle of people who believed leaving today meant coming back tomorrow. The door closed behind them. Not with a slam, with a soft sound that felt like the end of something. And as I stood there, Ethan beside me, my coffee cooling untouched. I didn't know it yet, but the moment they walked out of my house, they were already planning how to punish me for it. The house stayed quiet after the door shut. Not peaceful quiet. Not the kind that settles like a blanket. This was the kind of quiet that felt like a threat. Ethan stood beside me for a moment, his hand still hovering near my back, like he wasn't sure whether to touch me or give me space. I could tell he was holding something in. Anger, maybe, or disbelief. But he didn't speak first. He let me breathe. That was one of the reasons I loved him. He didn't try to fix me with words. He didn't turn my pain into a lecture. He just stayed. I stared at the door as if it might open again, as if my parents would suddenly realize how wrong they were and come back with something real. But deep down, I already knew the truth. People who use love as leverage don't suddenly learn mercy. They just learn new ways to squeeze. Ethan finally broke the silence. "Do you want me to call someone?" he asked quietly. "A friend? A lawyer? Anyone?" I almost laughed, small and bitter. "A lawyer?" I repeated. The word sounded dramatic, ridiculous, like something that only happened to other families, the kind you read about online and shake your head at. And yet, my father's face when he shouted, my mother's voice when she disowned me, Hudson's casual cruelty. That wasn't just family conflict. That was a warning. I shook my head. "Not yet," I said. Ethan nodded, but his jaw clenched. Then he reached down and picked up his phone from the coffee table. The screen lit up again. And again, I saw it. Sophie. The name was there for only a second before Ethan swiped the notification away so fast, it was like he wanted to erase it from the air. I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't notice, because I didn't want to add another crack to a day already splintering. But the feeling stayed in my chest like a pebble in my shoe. Small. Annoying. Impossible to ignore once you knew it was there. That night, we didn't talk about my parents again. We ate dinner quietly. We watched a show neither of us really followed. Ethan held my hand like he was afraid if he let go, I'd fall apart. And I didn't. Not outwardly. But inside, my mind kept rewinding the same moment. My father's voice, "Don't return to this house." The next 2 days passed strangely. Too normal. Work was work. Meetings, emails, deadlines. I caught myself smiling at coworkers, answering questions, doing everything like I wasn't carrying something heavy enough to bend my spine. But every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped. I expected my mother, my father, Hudson. Another attempt, another ambush. And when none came, I told myself, maybe they finally gave up. Maybe they finally understood I wasn't going to fold. That thought lasted until the third day. That afternoon, I was in the middle of documenting a system issue when my boss's assistant appeared at my desk. Her face was serious in a way that made my stomach tighten. "Alexandra," she said, voice low. "He wants to see you urgently." My fingers froze on the keyboard. My boss didn't call people in urgently unless something was wrong. For a second, a thought flashed through my mind so fast it didn't even feel like mine. They did something. I forced myself to stand calmly, grabbed my notebook, and walked toward his office. The hallway felt longer than usual. My footsteps sounded too loud on the carpet. When I reached the door, it was already open. My boss, Mr. Carter, sat behind his desk, expression unreadable. "Have a seat, Alexandra," he said. I sat down slowly. He slid a folder across the desk toward me. "You should take a look at this." My hands felt stiff as I opened it. Inside was a printed letter. Anonymous. Typed. Cold. I started reading. The words blurred for a second, then sharpened into something that made my blood turn to ice. The letter accused me of misusing company resources over the past 3 years. It claimed I'd used equipment, data, and company time to do outside freelance work. It said, almost smugly, that a woman only a few years into her career couldn't afford a home without shady behavior. I felt my throat tighten. I kept reading. Then my eyes dropped to the bottom of the page, and everything in me stopped. 3 signatures. My father. My mother. Hudson. I didn't even realize my hands were shaking until the paper rustled. My boss watched me quietly, letting me absorb it. When I finally looked up, my mouth opened, but no sound came out right away. I started. "I know," he interrupted calmly. His tone wasn't accusing. It was steady, firm. "I believe you, Alexandra. I've always trusted your work ethic." My lungs released a breath I didn't know I was holding. He leaned back slightly. "I didn't call you in to investigate you," he continued. "I called you in because this is serious, and I wanted to ask you something." I swallowed. "What?" I asked, voice tight. He folded his hands on the desk. "Do you want to take action against them?" I blinked, confused. "Action?" He nodded. "If you want to press defamation charges," he said, "I have a close friend who's a lawyer. I can connect you. It's your call." The word defamation sounded like something from a courtroom drama. Not my life, not my family. But as I stared down at the letter again, my confusion turned into something sharper. They didn't just insult me. They tried to destroy me where it mattered most. My career, my stability, the life I built without them. They weren't trying to win an argument anymore. They were trying to cut me down. A strange calm settled over me. It wasn't peace. It was clarity. I looked up at my boss. Yes, I said. My voice didn't shake. Yes, I want to take action. He nodded once, as if he'd expected that. I'll set it up today. That evening, after work, my boss introduced me to his friend, an attorney named Dean Keller. His office was on the 18th floor of a modest building in Midtown. When I walked in, Dean stood to greet me. He was in his 40s, solid build, sharp eyes, and a voice that sounded like decisions had been made in it for years. His handshake was firm. Not warm exactly, but professional. Like he already understood this wasn't just paperwork, it was a boundary. We sat. Dean skimmed the letter again, then looked up. I'm going to be blunt, he said. This qualifies as intentional defamation. My stomach twisted. Even hearing the legal term made it feel real in a way I wasn't ready for. Dean continued. They didn't just accuse you without basis. They signed their names. They presented it as evidence. If your employer hadn't trusted you, you could have been suspended, investigated, or permanently damaged reputationally. He paused, eyes narrowing slightly. And, he added, tapping the letter with one finger, there's something else here. I frowned. What? He slid the page closer to me and pointed at a sentence. The letter mentioned a detail about my home purchase. Not just that I owned one, something specific. The timing of the raise, the contract bonus, even a note about my remaining loan balance. My throat went dry. That information, I murmured. I never told them that. Dean watched me carefully. Exactly, he said. So either they're guessing with alarming confidence, or someone fed them details. A chill crawled up my arms. Someone fed them. I thought of the only people who knew those numbers. My bank, my mortgage agent, Ethan. No, Ethan wouldn't. Would he? The pebble in my shoe suddenly felt heavier. Dean leaned back. If you file a lawsuit, he said, the first step is a formal letter demanding a public apology and compensation for damage. I swallowed. And if they refuse? We file an official complaint, Dean said evenly. Depending on the outcome, there could be fines. In some cases, if it's proven they intended to sabotage your career, it can escalate. Usually it stays civil, but it becomes a real legal problem. My heart thudded once, hard. Then Dean asked the question that made the room feel smaller. Are you sure you want to do this? He said. Once we begin, there's no turning back. Not legally, and not with your family. I stared down at the letter again. At those 3 signatures. The people who should have protected me. The people who raised me to believe family was sacred. And who had just tried to weaponize my livelihood like it was nothing. I lifted my eyes. Yes, I said. Dean nodded once. All right, he said. Then I'll need your income history, pay slips from the past 3 years, and documents related to your home purchase. I'll build the file. You send those to me tonight. I nodded and stood. My legs felt steady even though my chest felt hollow. When I left his office, the city air hit my face like cold water. I sat in my car for a full minute before starting the engine. A year ago, I thought walking out of my parents' house was the hardest thing I would ever do. Now I realized walking out was easy. It was what came next that would cost. When I got home, Ethan was in the kitchen. He looked up immediately when he heard the door. Hey, he said carefully. How was your day? I set my bag down slowly. I met with a lawyer, I said. Ethan froze. His eyes flicked to my face, then to the envelope in my hand. What? He asked. I didn't soften it. I'm suing them, I said, for defamation. Ethan's face tightened. Then he stepped closer, voice low. Alex, are you sure? I looked him straight in the eye. I'm sure. Ethan nodded slowly, but I saw something pass across his expression. Not disagreement, something else, like worry, mixed with recognition. Like he knew what this kind of fight could turn into. And then his phone buzzed again. He didn't check it immediately. But I saw the screen light up on the counter. Sophie, again. Ethan reached for it fast, turned it face down, and looked back at me. We'll get through this, he said. And I wanted to believe him. I really did. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, You're about to find out who's really on your side. Because people like my parents don't accept no. And people like Hudson don't lose gracefully. They don't stop when they're rejected. They stop when they've made you regret refusing them. And I had a feeling they were just getting started. 3 days later, Dean sent the formal notice. It was clean, precise, legal language wrapped around sharp edges. A demand for a public apology, compensation for reputational harm, 7 days to respond. When I read the draft before he sent it, my hands didn't shake anymore. The trembling stage had passed. Now I felt something colder, measured. That night, my phone rang 4 times from an unknown number. I didn't answer the first 3. On the 4th, I picked up. Alexandra? My mother's voice cracked through the speaker, already vibrating with anger. What are you doing? You're taking your own family to court? I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring at the dark window. It's not about the loan, I said evenly. It's about the accusation letter. Silence. Then her breathing. Then, softer, almost frightened. We were just worried, she said. We thought something didn't make sense. You bought a house so quickly. People talk. Who talks? I asked quietly. She hesitated. Too long. No one, she snapped quickly. That's not the point. It was exactly the point. You signed your names, I said. You tried to get me investigated at work. We didn't think it would go that far, she cried. You're overreacting. I almost laughed. Overreacting. Because defending my career was dramatic, but trying to destroy it was reasonable. I'm not overreacting, I said calmly. I'm protecting myself. She went silent again. And this time I ended the call first. For the first time in my life, I hung up on my mother without guilt crawling up my spine. The next morning, at 8:15, the doorbell rang. Not aggressive this time, just once. Ethan looked at me from the dining table. We both knew who it was. When I opened the door, my father, mother, and Hudson stood there. No shouting, no fury, just tired faces and tight mouths. My father spoke first. I'm sorry, he said quietly. We let this go too far. His tone was softer than I'd ever heard it. Controlled. Strategic. My mother avoided my eyes. Hudson stared at the ground. We didn't understand the consequences, my father continued. Withdraw the lawsuit. Let's end this here. I studied them carefully. There were no tears. No real remorse. Just discomfort. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry it backfired. I'll withdraw it, I said slowly. 3 heads lifted at once. But, I continued, you will cover every dollar of legal fees I've already paid. My father's jaw tightened. How much? He asked. Dean will send the invoice, I replied calmly. There was a pause. Then he nodded once. Fine. No argument. No emotional appeal. That told me everything. They were afraid. Not of losing me. Of losing control. They left quietly. And when the door closed, Ethan stepped up beside me. It's finally over, he murmured. I nodded. But something in my chest told me this wasn't finished. Because people who feel humiliated rarely stop at surrender. They look for another way to win. That afternoon, Dean called. They came in this morning, he said. Signed the agreement. Paid the fees in full. He paused. You handled this cleanly. You could have pushed harder. I didn't want revenge, I said. I know, he replied. That's why you won. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. I expected to feel victorious. Instead, I felt empty, like something had ended, but something else had died with it. For a few weeks, life returned to something resembling normal. Work was steady. Evenings were quiet. Ethan and I cooked dinner together again. We played our usual jazz playlist. We took slow walks around the neighborhood. But small things began to bother me. Tiny details. One night, while Ethan was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the coffee table. I didn't mean to look, but the screen lit up. Sophie, they're not going to stop, you know. My stomach dropped. The message disappeared before I could read more. When Ethan came back into the room, I asked casually, Have you been talking to Sophie a lot lately? He froze just slightly. Not a lot, he said carefully. She just checks in sometimes. About what? I asked. Life, he shrugged. Old friend stuff. Old friends. Sophie wasn't just an old friend. She was his ex-girlfriend from before we met. They'd ended badly. She'd accused him of cheating. He'd denied it. The relationship imploded. I'd never pushed for details. But now, I wondered. Does she know what's happening with my family? I asked lightly. Ethan hesitated. Maybe, he admitted. I might have mentioned it once. My chest tightened. Why? He ran a hand through his hair. She went through something similar with her own parents, he said. I thought she might understand. A strange chill crept up my spine. Someone fed them details, Dean had said. I never told my parents about my remaining loan balance. Ethan knew. Sophie might have known. And Sophie had a history of resentment. I didn't accuse him. I didn't explode. I just nodded slowly. But that pebble in my shoe? It was no longer small. 2 weeks later, something else happened. An anonymous online thread appeared in a local community forum. It didn't name me directly, but it described a woman in tech who built her success off questionable ethics and cut off her struggling family after refusing to help. It was vague, but specific enough that anyone who knew me could connect the dots. My phone buzzed with a message from a coworker. Hey, is this about you? I stared at the screen. The legal issue was closed. But this? This was personal. This was social. And it felt like someone testing the waters. I showed Ethan. His face paled. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "Do you think it's them?" I asked. He hesitated again. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe." Maybe. The word tasted wrong. That night, after dinner, we sat on the couch in silence. The soft yellow lights glowed. The jazz playlist hummed. I leaned into Ethan's shoulder, trying to ground myself. He wrapped his arm around me, but his phone vibrated again. He didn't check it. Not immediately. But I saw the screen light up against his leg. Sophie, again. And this time, instead of flipping it over instantly, Ethan stared at it for a second too long. Just a second. But enough. "Are you still talking to her about my family?" I asked quietly. He looked at me, defensive flickering in his eyes. "She's just offering perspective," he said. "She thinks your parents are manipulative." "And?" I asked. "And she thinks you should have sued them harder," he replied. A strange realization began forming in my chest. Sophie hated losing. So did my parents. And if there was one thing those three people had in common, it was pride. "Alex," Ethan said softly, sensing my withdrawal, "you trust me, right?" I looked at him. The man who had held me when I walked out of my childhood home. The man who said he'd get through this with me. And suddenly I wasn't sure what parts of my life were contained and what parts were leaking. "I want to," I said honestly. The words hung between us, not an accusation. Not forgiveness. Just truth. Because trust isn't destroyed by one betrayal. It's eroded by small, quiet cracks. And I was starting to see fractures. That night, long after Ethan fell asleep, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My lawsuit was over. My family had backed down. But the online rumor thread was growing. The anonymous comments were multiplying. And someone, somewhere, was feeding details. Details only a small circle of people knew. My parents didn't have the writing style for that letter. Hudson barely wrote coherent emails. But Sophie, she worked in communications. She understood tone, narrative, damage. I closed my eyes. And for the first time since this began, I asked myself a question that scared me more than any lawsuit. What if the real betrayal isn't coming from where I think? Because if someone close to me was quietly passing information, then this wasn't just a family war. It was something much closer, much more dangerous. And I had a feeling the next move wouldn't come from my parents' house. It would come from inside mine. I didn't confront Ethan the next morning. Not immediately. Instead, I did something I'd never done before in my life. I started paying attention, not emotionally, logically. Who knew what? Who had access to what? Who benefited from what? At work, I asked IT to check whether any internal financial documents tied to my raise or bonus had been accessed externally. Nothing unusual. At the bank, I confirmed there had been no breaches. That left only one possibility. Information shared casually, in conversation, at home. That night, I came back earlier than usual. Ethan was in the living room, laptop open, phone beside him. He looked up when I entered. "You're home early," he said. "Meeting got canceled," I replied. I set my bag down and walked casually behind the couch. And that's when I saw it. An email draft open on his screen. It wasn't addressed yet, but the text was there. "She still doesn't suspect anything. Her lawyer backed off quicker than expected. I told him to stop pushing for now. We need to wait." My chest went cold, slowly like ice forming under skin. Ethan moved quickly to close the laptop. Too quickly. "What was that?" I asked. His face drained of color. "It's not what you think." The sentence people use when it's exactly what you think. "Who is them?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. My voice sharpened. "Who is them, Ethan?" He exhaled hard and ran a hand through his hair. "It's Sophie," he admitted. The name landed heavy. "And?" I pressed. "And your parents." The room tilted. Not dramatically. Just enough to shift everything I thought I knew. "What are you saying?" I whispered. He stepped forward, desperate now. "Alex, listen to me. It wasn't supposed to get this far. Sophie reached out after the dinner fight. She said she'd seen your mom post something vague online. She thought maybe your parents needed encouragement to stand up to you." Encouragement. My lungs burned. "So you connected them?" I asked. "I just introduced them once," he said quickly. "Sophie offered advice. She said if you felt pressure at work, you might compromise." Compromise. My knees felt weak. "You helped them try to destroy my career," I said slowly. "No," he shouted. "I didn't think they'd actually send the letter. I thought it was just talk. Sophie said it would scare you into helping Hudson. She said it was temporary. Temporary sabotage. Temporary humiliation. Temporary betrayal." "You knew," I said, my voice no longer trembling. "You knew about the letter before I did." He couldn't meet my eyes. "That's why you weren't surprised," I continued. "That's why you kept saying we'd get through this." Silence. And in that silence, everything rearranged itself. The supportive boyfriend. The steady presence. The calm advice. He hadn't been grounding me. He'd been monitoring the fallout. "Why?" I asked. and this time my voice broke. Ethan looked almost ashamed. "You've always handled everything yourself," he said. "You never need anyone. Sophie said if you felt cornered, you'd realize you can't fight alone, that you'd lean on me more." My heart stopped. This wasn't about money. It wasn't about Hudson. It was about control. He wanted to be indispensable, to be the only safe place, even if it meant helping create the danger. "You tried to manufacture my dependence," I whispered. His silence was answer enough. Tears burned behind my eyes, but they didn't fall. Because this pain wasn't explosive. It was surgical. Precise. "I loved you," I said quietly. "I love you," he insisted. "No," I replied calmly. "You loved the version of me that needed you." The house felt different suddenly. Smaller. Contaminated. "You need to leave," I said. His head snapped up. "Alex!" "Leave," I repeated. For the first time since this began, I wasn't shaking. I wasn't emotional. I was clear. He packed a bag in silence. At the door, he turned back. "Sophie pushed this too far," he said. "I didn't know she'd escalate to the forum posts. I told her to stop." Forum posts. So it was her. And he knew. I didn't answer. I just opened the door. When it closed behind him, the silence felt heavier than the day my parents left. Because blood betrayal hurts. But chosen betrayal? That cuts deeper. The next morning, I called Dean again. "I need to reopen something," I said. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. "Send me everything," he replied. This time it wasn't about my parents. It was about conspiracy, intent, collusion. Within a week, cease and desist letters were sent to both Sophie and my parents. This time I didn't offer conditions. I didn't negotiate. I documented, collected messages, screenshots, email drafts. Ethan's partial confession. When Sophie received her notice, she reacted exactly as expected. She posted publicly, called me dramatic, manipulative, claimed I was inventing stories to avoid helping my struggling family. But this time I was ready. Dean moved swiftly. A formal complaint. Evidence attached. Digital trail undeniable. Within a month, Sophie's employer placed her under internal review. My parents withdrew entirely. Hudson went silent. And Ethan? He tried calling once. I didn't answer. Some battles aren't loud. Some victories don't feel triumphant. They feel like cutting out something infected before it spreads. 3 weeks later, something unexpected happened. I started feeling sick in the mornings. At first, I blamed stress, then denial, then hope. When the test turned positive, I sat on the bathroom floor for 10 full minutes. Not crying, not laughing, just breathing. A tiny heartbeat inside me. Life, unconnected to manipulation, unconnected to betrayal. Something pure. I had planned a wedding, but that wedding had included Ethan. That version of the future no longer existed. I canceled the venue, returned the invitations, took the loss. And for the first time in months, I made a decision that wasn't about reaction. It was about protection. I wouldn't raise my child in a battlefield. Not my parents. Not Ethan's. Not Sophie's. I didn't know yet what single motherhood would look like. I didn't know how hard it would be. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. My child would never learn that love is conditional. 2 days ago, I received a final email. From Sophie. Short. Cold. "You've won. I hope it was worth it." I read it once, then deleted it. Because winning wasn't the point. Peace was. And peace requires boundaries. Now, as I sit in the quiet living room of the house I built, alone but not broken, I think back to that first dinner, to the moment my father said, "Don't return to this house." He thought it was a punishment, but it was permission. Permission to stop sacrificing myself. Permission to stop earning love. Permission to build something better. My wedding isn't happening next week, but something bigger is. In 7 months, I'll meet the only person whose love will never require negotiation. And when that day comes, there will be no question about invitations. No guilt. No debate. Because family isn't who shares your blood. It's who protects your future. And I finally learned the difference.